Well, I bet a lot of you are making the same bad gardening decision that we've been making lately, and today we want to talk to you about it.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Living Traditions Homestead, where over the past 8 years we have been building our dream life here in the Missouri Ozarks after leaving corporate America.
When we first moved to Missouri from Arizona, we were absolutely blown away by the length of the growing season here. It is a very, very long growing season. Basically, it goes from the beginning of May until at the very least mid-October, sometimes even past mid-October. And while that can be a blessing in most situations, sometimes it can also be a bit of a curse.
So we were really excited when we moved here, knowing that we would have such a long growing season. We just couldn't wait to get plants in the ground, and boy, have we gardened.
We have had some amazing gardens since we've moved here, but there's always been one thing that we've struggled with, and it happens about this time of year every year. And my gut tells me that a lot of you probably struggle with exactly the same thing, and that is you really want your plants to make it all the way from your last frost all the way until your first frost, and you are going to do everything in your power to keep limping these plants along, even though deep down in your soul you know it's time for these plants to go.
Now, there are some plants who can easily last the entire growing season, like peppers. Peppers can last the entire growing season. You can even dig them up and pot them, bring them in the house over the winter, and then repot them in the spring because they really can live a healthy life for such a long time. But we all know that there are plants out there that really have a limited lifespan, like beans, especially bush beans, but also pole beans. They'll give you 1 or 2 really good crops, but after that, the plants look terrible, the beans taste terrible, even if
Right.
they have another round of flowers. The beans are just gross. So there are just plants like that. They just can't last the entire season, and they just need to go.
Another one I would think is cucumbers, especially here in our area where it gets so hot and humid. Cucumbers never make it the entire season. And while we do have time to sometimes plant a second round of them, a lot of years we just decide we're going to try hard to keep that first round of them going. And in doing so, we really just create a lot more work for ourselves.
There are, sprays and things that you can put on your plants to help with the funguses and all of that. And early on in a plant's life cycle, I think it's absolutely worth giving those things a shot. In fact, this spring, we had such a hard time with aphids in our greenhouse and our tomatoes. I mean, you guys saw, we almost lost all of our tomato plants early on. So we did heroics as far as even buying a fogger and trying out a milk and water solution to spray on them, which actually ended up killing all of those aphids, and now we've got wonderful tomatoes.
Right. But by this point in the season, if that same problem were to happen again, I don't think we would go to those great lengths to try to save them at this point. At this point, it would just be time to say, tomato season is over and we'll try again next year. So this year we are making that tough decision. We are deciding to pull some of our plants. Now, we're not pulling tomatoes and stuff yet. Don't get me wrong. We're not cutting tomato season short. But we are going to be pulling some of our plants sooner than we may have in past years because we are making that tough decision. And really there's a couple reasons that we're doing this. All of them that we already talked about. The plants are starting to look terrible. The fruit or vegetables on those plants aren't tasting nearly as good as they used to. But there's another big reason, and that has to do with the amount of work later in the fall.
Now, a lot of times by the end of the gardening season, we are so burnt out and we just want to be done. So the thought of going back out into the garden when everything has died back, to pull all of those plants and get rid of them, that has just seemed like way too much work and the last thing we want to do in the fall.
Especially once the weather starts to get really cold, and let's face it, we all get to a point where as excited as we were in the spring to garden, a lot of years we're just as excited for it to be over in the fall. And then the thought of going out in wet, nasty, cold weather to pull all of those plants, we'll be honest, you guys, there's a lot of years where those plants just end up staying in our garden until the following spring.
But then when spring comes, we're so irritated with ourselves because all that work that we left in the fall is now to be done in the spring, when all we want to do in the spring is plant.
Right.
We don't want to take care of last year's mess, and honestly, by the next spring, it's even a worse mess.
Right. So by pulling the plants along the way,
Right.
like we're going to start doing today, it will kind of break some of that work up. We will start kind of emptying out our raised beds one at a time as the plants come to the end of their life. And in the greenhouse, we're going to start kind of emptying out the pots that we have in there one at a time as the plants come to the
Right.
end of their life. And that way, by the time we get to the real end of growing season, which for us is around the middle of October, a lot of the work will already be done, and
Right.
we'll probably have 50% of the plants already out, and it will seem more like a natural progression to just kind of slowly wind up the gardening season.
So today we are going to be going through the garden area here and the greenhouse with you guys and kind of identifying the plants that are ready to be done, and we're going to pull those so that we kind of start the momentum of fall to kind of get ready for the end of gardening season.
And as we're going through the garden here today, I am going to have to stop and make a confession to you guys. There is something growing in the garden that I had really high hopes for this spring. I showed you guys this. I was so excited, and you guys, it just hasn't turned out the way that I had hoped. So when we get back there, I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit, and again, I have a confession to make.
So let's start here in the big raised bed garden area.
So the first thing that needs to come out of the garden today is going to be our Kentucky Wonder or Old Homestead pole beans.
While we're pulling all of these bean plants, we're also just going to go ahead and pull the cinnamon basil plants that we have here, and the marigold and anything else that is in this raised bed. While both of those are really doing pretty good yet, the basil isn't really tasting as good as it did, and the flowers are just kind of long and spindly. I do see that the bees are really enjoying the flowers on the cinnamon basil and the marigolds, but I don't feel badly that we're going to pull them because there are still a lot of other flowers in the garden and on the homestead that they can go visit.
The beans that are coming on now really aren't very good. They're really stringy right off the bat. Even when they're small, they're stringy and kind of woody, and the taste just isn't nearly as good as it was when we started these in the spring.
We got two really nice flushes of amazing tasting beans, and that's really even typical of bush beans. You get like 2 crops of them, and then after that the beans just taste terrible and the plants look terrible as well. I'd like for this raised bed to just be completely empty so that it helps us kind of move into fall.
We did already save all of the beans that we need for seed for next year, so we don't have to worry about saving any more beans for seed. So today can be all about getting this raised bed completely cleared out. The next thing that absolutely has to come out of the garden today are the cucumbers.
Just like the other raised bed, we are going to take out all of the marigolds.
It's been at least a few weeks since we've harvested any cucumbers out of the garden area, and you can see that they are just not in good shape at all, and at this point it's just not worth trying to save them. I don't think we'd be successful anyway, and we had a lot of cucumbers this year, so we're very happy with the amount that we got.
In this raised bed, I also have fennel plants that are flowering and going to seed. This is the first year I've ever planted fennel, and I've never cooked with it either. So I do want to save seeds so that I can give it a try another time. So we're taking out all of the cucumber plants and all the marigolds.
All right, so on to my confession. The next bed here that I'm standing by that needs to be ripped out today are mustard plants. You guys, I had huge plans this spring to plant mustard to let it go to seed, and then to make my own prepared mustard this fall. I did a bunch of research last winter about what variety would produce the most seed, and I was so excited. And you guys, this stuff grew so good. Like, the greens were amazing, and the plants looked so healthy, and it did exactly what it was supposed to do. It started to bolt, it went to seed, and then the seed head started to dry out, and I was like, great, I'm going to come out here and I'm going to start collecting seeds so that I can go in the house and make some mustard. So at this point, about half the plants were starting to die back. I came out one day and I picked just a few of the pods off of here, and I took some of the pods in the house. Now, this is one of the mustard seed pods right here. You can see how tiny those are, and inside of each one of those pods are about 4 seeds. Now, I took those in the house, the pods that I had collected, and I sat down at the kitchen table with a paper plate and I started to take all the seeds out. It took me about 3 minutes, and I had about 20 little mustard seeds. I started to think to myself, I wonder how many mustard seeds I'm going to actually need to make some mustard. I would imagine I would need at least a cup of mustard seeds. So then I started thinking, I wonder how many mustard seeds are in a cup, because I just spent 3 minutes to get 20 of these tiny little seeds. So I researched it a little bit, and I found out that there are 48,000 seeds in a cup. Got me thinking again, it's time to do some nerdy mustard math. So I was thinking, if I need 48,000 seeds and it took me 3 minutes to get 20, how long is that going to take me to get 48,000? And after doing the math, I figured out that to get 48,000 seeds, it would take me 120 hours. Definitely not worth my time to get that amount of seed. So then I started thinking, I wonder how much mustard seed costs if I were to buy it from a place like Azure Standard. I can buy a pound of mustard seed, organic, for $8. That's 300,000 seeds. So that would be about 4 cups, which means I would have to spend 120 hours of my time to save $2 on mustard seed. So you guys, I've let the rest of it sit here. Actually, the goldfinches have absolutely loved these plants. They've been getting the rest of the seed, and today I'm going to pull these plants and I'm just going to order some mustard. I am still planning on learning how to make prepared mustard, but I'm not going to be doing it with homemade or with homegrown seed. I'm going to be doing it with seed that I bought, because I don't have 120 extra hours to get a cup of mustard seed. Now on to the greenhouse. In the greenhouse, we have 2 things that we're going to be pulling today. We're going to be pulling all of our squash plants. That is zucchini, yellow crookneck, and lemon squash. And then we're also going to be pulling our cucumber plants after that. Now, the squash plants, this is our second round of squash plants for this summer. And we have gotten a ton of squash, specifically the zucchini and the yellow crookneck. They did really well this year, and we've got way more than we need. And the plants are looking pretty bad now. Even though this is our second planting, we probably could try to save them and keep them limping along for a while yet. They got hit pretty hard with powdery mildew a few weeks ago, and we didn't catch it fast enough. Sarah and I actually took one of the very few trips that we take every year, and we went out of town up to the lake just for a few days for our 26th anniversary. And when we got back, these plants were pretty bad already with the powdery mildew. We had contemplated using the milk spray like we used early this summer on our tomato plants, because everything we read said that that should work with the powdery mildew. But they were already so far gone that we have decided that instead we're just going to pull them today and decide that zucchini and other squash season is over for this year.
Next up are the Wisconsin pickling cucumbers. We really enjoyed these cucumbers this year. They grew well and they produced a lot, and we think that from now on we're probably going to plant these along with maybe 1 or 2 other varieties like this here. To take all of this down, first we are going to just cut the plants right at the soil level. The bottom of the trellis is actually connected to a board, like a 1x2. So we're just gonna lift that board up and around the buckets and onto the ground so that the whole thing is just kind of moving freely. And then Kevin's gonna get up on the ladder and he is actually just going to cut the trellis free from the top of the greenhouse. So everything can come down all at once. We're gonna drag this out of the greenhouse. And we're gonna actually put it in our burn barrel. We think that that's probably the easiest way to get rid of this. It has too many diseases and who knows what for us to try to compost this. Well, you guys, I can tell you that I already feel a difference in the stress factor of fall cleanup. It's already diminishing just with the few things that we took out of the garden and took out of the greenhouse.
And to be honest, it's making the overall feel of the garden and the greenhouse just kind of calmer.
Yep.
You know, when you walk out here and you see these plants that aren't doing well, you feel kind of bad.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really, I think, better off just to have them out of the way. So now when we come out here, what we see are all of the plants that are still doing great, and it's just a happier place to be.
So we'd like to know from you all, are there lessons that you have learned already about things that you can do to make fall cleanup less overwhelming? We'd like to hear about those in the comments below because maybe there's more that we need to be doing.
We're so glad that you decided to spend the day with us working in the garden and the greenhouse. We hope that by having talks like this, it might make you feel a little bit better about the decisions you have to make on your homestead as well. We all want our plants to last as long as they possibly can, but all good things have to come to an end, and sometimes it's just a matter of making the best decision.
You guys, if you're enjoying videos like this, we would sure love for you to hit the subscribe button. Also, if you've been a subscriber for a while, will you go ahead and check for us and make sure that you're still subscribed? I guess quite a few people are unknowingly unsubscribed and they don't know how.
Don't forget as well to have that notification bell pushed so that you get notified of all of our new videos. And remember, as always, the absolute best way you can help us here on the homestead is just by sharing our videos with other people that you might think would like them as well. Until next time, thank you so much for stopping by the homestead. Take care, and God bless.
God bless.